He's not in any way hateful toward the Jewish community. In fact, the majority of Jewish New Yorkers supported him in the mayoral race, in the primary specifically. So we'll see how it plays out. I don't really get the vibe that he's a hateful guy. I do get the vibe that he's very idealistic.
Ana Kasparian, best known from The Young Turks, recently joined Tomi Lahren on her show for a spirited discussion covering several issues. Their conversation went on for almost an hour and touched on a variety of topics. In this video, I will be focusing on a few specific parts of that debate and showing you some key clips. We'll break down a segment of the exchange between Ana Kasparian and the conservative Maga commentator Tomi Lahren, and I'll be adding my own perspective as we go through it. Let's jump right in.
I also want to talk about Zohran Mamdani, and I don't know how you feel about him, but there's some concerning things here. And I watched the debate last week, and looking at it from someone's perspective who doesn't, I tried to look at it as somebody who lived in New York that wasn't as read into all of his past as I am. And I thought, wow, this guy is dangerous because he sure sounded good. And I think people listening to it that are frustrated about affordability and other things, I think they would have listened to him and said, he's not so bad. And I think he is that bad, though. So I'm wondering your take on his performance and if you would like to see him win the race in New York.
Well, when you look at the contenders, I would never vote for Cuomo in a million years. And Sliwa doesn't appear to have a chance. So, and out of the three, I do think that Mamdani would be the better, candidate, a better mayor. I'm curious what you don't like about him, because it really depends on who you're talking to. And when it comes to the political establishments, whether you're talking about Democrats or Republicans, by the way, they seem to have a lot of hate toward him because of the fact that he hasn't expressed fealty to Israel, which as a mayoral candidate, I don't even know why that's something that's even being asked of him or any mayoral candidate. But if you have issues with particular policy proposals, I'm super curious which ones, because I actually think some of his policy proposals are a little shaky. And I'm wondering if we have similarities there.
Yeah, there's a lot of policy proposals that I think are a little shaky. And I would say this, I don't think it's that he needs to bend the knee to Israel. If that's not his thing and that's not where his allegiance lies, then I understand it. And I don't think that it necessarily should. It should be to the United States of America and to New York City. I think what's concerning about him is some of his past rhetoric and, the failure to condemn, globalize the Intifada and some of his shaky statements there when you've got the largest Jewish population in the world outside of Israel in New York City. I do think at some point you need to address the things that you've said in the past. And speaking of, social media posts that were not that long ago, his social media posts from 2020, 2021 are very concerning. And I know that he's trying to clean that up now, but I think it's really hard to go from the NYPD is racist and they're not for queer liberation and all this stuff to, no, I respect them, and make that leap. It feels a little disingenuous. He was asked how he got there, and he didn't give a clear answer on that. And as far as his policy proposals go, I think it sounds great to say we're going to have free buses and we're going to have grocery stores and we're going to have childcare and all those things. But when it comes to how are you going to pay for it, and his only answer is raise taxes, but he doesn't have the power to do that, I think he's making a lot of false promises that unfortunately people are going to fall for. And I'm sure you probably share some of the same concerns.
Oh, totally. I mean, look, there's a lot that he has proposed that I do like. Well, it's really about the devil in the details, right? So I was first and foremost worried that he was going to cut the police budget. And we did that in Los Angeles in 2021. When I say we, I mean the city council. They cut the police budget to the tune of $150 million. And as a result, taxpayers in the city ended up spending far more on policing because we didn't have enough sworn officers to carry out the duties necessary in a city as big as Los Angeles. So the remaining sworn officers had to work extra overtime hours, which costs a lot more. And so it's not economically sound policy, but also it led to increased wait times if you call 911 and you need a police officer to show up. So I was actually very worried that he was going to follow in the failed footsteps of the LA City Council. And he has reeled in some of the anti-police rhetoric. And what he's actually proposing now, which I fully do support, I think this is a smart policy, rather than getting rid of cops, he promised not to fire or lay off a single police officer, NYPD police officer, NY police officer. And then in addition to that, he wants to add social workers within the department to go to calls alongside the sworn officers if it's like a mental health emergency. I think that's a smart idea. But also, yeah, I mean, how are you going to pay for it? If you're planning on raising taxes, you're going to need a lot more buy-in. You can't do that unilaterally. Obviously, you're going to need, policymakers and lawmakers locally to agree with you on that policy.
I find myself in full agreement with Ana Kasparian, and surprisingly, even with Tomi Lahren to some extent, on the topic of Mamdani and the Israel discussion. In one of the debates that included Cuomo and several other candidates, I thought Mamdani gave one of the most honest and grounded responses. While the rest of the candidates were practically competing to declare how eager they were to visit Israel once elected, Mamdani stood firm and said something that really stood out. "I'm running to be the mayor of New York City. What does visiting another country have to do with my responsibilities here? My duty is to the people of New York." That, to me, was a perfectly reasonable and admirable stance. After all, New York has far more practical connections with Canada through geography, trade, and economics than it does with Israel. Yet no one ever asks candidates about their plans for visiting Canada. So, labeling Mamdani as anti-Israel for that response is absolutely ridiculous. This should always be about putting America first. There are dozens of issues that directly affect New Yorkers long before the topic of Israel should ever enter the conversation. Now, when it comes to the question of funding, how will you pay for it? That line perfectly sums up the Republican mindset. Just last night, I was talking to a family member about this. Imagine if public libraries didn't exist, and someone today proposed opening places where everyone could borrow books for free. You can already picture the outrage from Fox News and right-wing commentators claiming, "This is socialism. Nothing is free. Someone's paying for that." The same would happen with parks. If someone suggested creating public spaces where people could walk, play, or relax without paying an entry fee, conservatives would lose their minds. Yet these things already exist, and we all recognize them as public goods funded by our taxes for the benefit of the community. But in today's political climate, suggesting anything that helps people, like free school lunches or public buses funded by taxes, triggers an immediate backlash from the right. It's as if conservatives, Maga supporters, and commentators like Tomi Lahren can only support government spending if it's for the police or the military. Anything that actually improves quality of life for ordinary citizens, a park, a library, free transportation, they dismiss as some kind of radical idea. So when someone brings up free bus service paid through taxes, of course, Tomi Lahren and those who think like her are going to oppose it without hesitation.
Charismatic enough to maybe accomplish that. When it comes to the free buses, though, I'm not ideologically against free buses. It's just that the way the public transportation is funded is mostly through people paying their fares. So I'm okay with subsidizing fares for low-income individuals. But if you don't have a real policy in place to help fund and maintain the public transportation, that can kind of end up being disastrous. So I have areas with him where I agree, areas where I disagree. But overall, the globalized intifada thing, he actually has finally come out and condemned it. I think it was like a huge, ridiculous wedge issue that in the end of the day doesn't really matter. He's not in any way hateful toward the Jewish community. In fact, the majority of Jewish New Yorkers supported him in the mayoral race, in the primary specifically. So we'll see how it plays out. I don't really get the vibe that he's a hateful guy. I do get the vibe that he's very idealistic. And sometimes having an idealistic mind as someone who's going to lead a big city could have some serious repercussions. So I would say he needs to proceed with caution and look to other big blue cities that implemented similar policies that maybe didn't work out and recalibrate. So these solutions actually do end up being solutions in New York.
Yeah, I just don't see wealthy New Yorkers. He can't do it anyway, but even if he were to miraculously convince Hochul that we're going to just raise all these taxes and all this, I don't see the rich and wealthy. I don't see all of them staying there. I'm sure some will because they love New York, but I see a lot of them leaving because why would they shoulder that burden? They don't have to. They're rich. They can go to West Palm Beach and the weather's nicer. Right? I don't see that being just a viable solution to pay for everything. And some of the things that he's said do concern me. I know he's playing cleanup now, and it's weird to me. It's like, At first, when he did that interview with Martha McCallum last week, like he wouldn't condemn Hamas when he was asked repeatedly. He just wouldn't say it. And then he gets to the debate and then he'll say it a little bit more. It's like he realizes that he has to be a little bit stronger in some of his language. And I just don't think it comes from a genuine place. And that concerns me. But I'm also curious what you think about him becoming kind of the face of the Democrat Party. When you don't actually have a leader, then the leaders are going to be Mamdani, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Jasmine Crockett. And I know that the right loves that, because I think if those people are going to be the face of the Democrat Party, so far removed from especially middle America and the swing states, that's great for Republicans. I don't think it's so great for Democrats.
I think AOC is actually making a huge miscalculation. That I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Maybe you'll be the first on the right to report on this, but AOC has started to make a completely different political calculation. And it appears to me that she's trying to ingratiate herself with the old guard Democratic establishment as she potentially and very likely seeks higher office. So I see her as someone who's actually significantly moderated her views, whereas the success or lack of success of Mamdani's mayoral leadership is really going to determine whether his brand of leadership is going to essentially be the identity of the Democratic Party. Right now, there's pretty much a fight for the identity of the Democratic Party. And I think the old guard establishment variety is really losing a lot of favorability with Democratic voters, which is why you're seeing Schumer put up this fight, by the way, when it comes to the government funding bill. But with Mamdani, that's why I say he needs to look at some of the cities who have implemented similar policies that failed, so he can recalibrate and do this in a smart, nuanced way so it actually works. Because if his policies don't work, if things actually end up worsening on the ground in New York City, the Democrats are fully cooked. I don't really know what the identity of the Democratic Party is going to be. And I honestly think the best way to move forward is to have conversations with people who disagree with you constantly, have your ideas challenged, talk to your constituents, and see if they're actually liking the way these policies are implemented.
Tomi Lahren kicked things off by taking a jab at the Democratic Party, though like many Republicans, she used the dismissive phrase Democrat Party, which always feels a bit childish. She argued that it would be terrible if politicians like Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez became the leading voices of the party. Personally, I think the exact opposite is true. Having leaders who fight for working people instead of billionaires and massive corporations would be a huge improvement. That's the kind of leadership most Democrats and most people on the actual left want to see. If the party leaned into those progressive ideas instead of clinging to the same centrist positions encouraged by corporate media and conservatives, they'd likely have far more success at the ballot box. Lahren then repeated one of the right wing's oldest and weakest arguments, the claim that if taxes on the wealthy go up, the rich will just move away. She mentioned how they could head off to places like Palm Beach or Palm Springs, but let's be honest, they already own homes there, and history proves her wrong. Between the 1940s and early 1980s, America's top tax rate ranged from 70% to 91%, and the rich didn't run away. They stayed, they built businesses, and during that time the country created the strongest middle class in history. Since then, conservatives have been slowly dismantling that progress, chipping away at the very system that made the American middle class thrive. What's funny is that Mamdani isn't even talking about dramatic tax hikes, just a modest increase of a few percent. He even mentioned that one wealthy critic is spending more money trying to stop his campaign than he would actually pay in higher taxes if Donnie's proposal passed. That says it all. Overall, this exchange between Ana Kasparian and Tomi Lahren was genuinely engaging. And while I know many progressives have distanced themselves from Ana for trying to appeal to both sides, I still think she made some solid points here. I'm curious to hear what you think. Did you side more with Ana's perspective or with Tomi's take on the issue? If you want to watch their full discussion, check out Tomi Lahren's channel. Share your thoughts in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next video.